All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really sensitive, deeply personal intersection. The collision between our basic human biological instincts and, well, rigid societal taboos. We're looking at something that is literally a universal human experience, yet it's almost never discussed with total transparency. We're going to explore the profound psychological costs of extreme sexual repression, and we're drawing this directly from a foundational text that bravely attempts to bridge this massive gap between our biology and societal expectations. And just to set the tone, listen to this quote from the source text. It perfectly captures the immense emotional stakes we're dealing with here. It reads, "Perhaps this is what love is called. A fire has ignited inside the chest." It's incredibly visceral poetry, right? It expresses the sheer anguish of unexpressed, misunderstood desires. Because you see, this isn't just a matter of clinical biology. It's about a deeply felt internal fire that, when it's forced into total darkness without any guidance, can literally start to consume a person from the inside out.
What's really fascinating about this source text, which is titled Jins or Jinsiyat, translating to sex and sexuality, is how it boldly kicks off an academic conversation on a topic that is usually just completely suffocated by cultural silence. The author notes right off the bat that discussions around human sexuality are almost always heavy, awkward, and clouded by immense shame. But by actually analyzing real human experiences, the text attempts to just strip away all that awkwardness and look at the raw reality of human development.
Section 1. Saad's Internal Storm, a case study in guilt. To really understand this, we're going to look at the harrowing personal experience of a young man named Saad, whose life is chronicled in the text. And this isn't just a sad story. It's a profound psychological case study of what happens when natural biology collides with total, absolute ignorance. His unguided biological development quickly spiraled from normal childhood confusion into a really debilitating cycle of shame. Imagine being 11 years old, experiencing entirely normal physical and emotional changes, but because literally no one explains this to you, by your early teens you are drowning in guilt. Saad believed these changes were a sign of deep moral failing. By his mid-teens, he was so desperate he was actually seeking out magical amulets to cure himself. And ultimately, this led to severe psychological paralysis in his adulthood. So, without any proper understanding of his own biology, Saad's mind just manufactured these terrifying spiritual explanations for perfectly natural occurrences. His coping mechanisms were absolutely tragic. He genuinely thought he was cursed by dark magic. He's visiting fake spiritual healers, performing extreme rituals out of sheer terror, and even developing intense physical symptoms like actual trembling and weakness. He ended up completely isolated, totally convinced that he was uniquely broken. Section 2. The silent anguish of Shaji.
Now, this psychological torment definitely doesn't only afflict men. When we compare Saad's experience with a woman referred to in the text as Shaji, we see how societal repression uniquely traumatizes both genders just based on the different boundaries forced upon them. Think about it. While Saad's trauma manifested as this intense internalized guilt and a desperate search for magical cures to fix his broken morality, Shaji's trauma was defined by intense external restriction. She faced forced separations, severe familial confinement, and this overwhelming loss of any purpose in life, which made her feel utterly, completely trapped.
I mean, listen to this heartbreaking excerpt describing her reality. She was an unmarried 25-year-old woman, and she says, "I am nothing but a breathing corpse. My heart and brain feel paralyzed, and there is no purpose left in my life." Just let those words sink in. A breathing corpse. It highlights the sheer, undeniable psychological devastation of forced emotional starvation. When your natural human desires for connection, for intimacy, and for a shared life are completely blocked by these rigid, unyielding societal walls, the psychological self basically begins to shut down. Having seen the profound, very real personal suffering of these individuals, we have to pause here. We have to ask ourselves a really difficult question. Why? Why do human civilizations build these specific and frankly incredibly painful walls around a process that is quite literally as natural to us as breathing or eating? Section 3. Biology versus society. Let's take a look at the macro perspective. To answer that why, we have to zoom out. We need to look at the stark contrast the text draws between the very simplistic reproductive nature of animals and the deeply complex, constant emotional drive of humans. Unlike animals, whose mating is seasonal, strictly tied to making babies, and governed 100% by instinct, human sexuality is a whole different ballgame. It's constant. It's deeply tied to emotional and psychological fulfillment, and crucially, it requires immense conscious regulation. We aren't bound by mating seasons, we're bound by society.
In fact, the source text argues that because human desire is so potent and unyielding, it behaves almost like a natural disaster waiting to happen if it's left totally unchecked. It uses words like a hidden volcano or a storm. It's this incredibly powerful force that literally drives the continuation of our entire species, but its sheer intensity makes it inherently volatile. Historically speaking, early humans dealt with this by simply not having boundaries. Thousands of years ago, primitive humans lived in caves and acted on their urges much more freely. But eventually, to build civilization, to create safe family units, and honestly, to simply survive each other, they realized they had to invent strict social codes.
It's like a clear progression of societal evolution. Step 1, you've got primitive freedom. Step 2, rising conflict. All those unchecked desires cause tribal chaos that actually threatened human survival. So step 3, to fix this, civilizations constructed massive societal walls. We're talking moral, religious, and legal boundaries to protect the family unit. But step 4, well, that's where we are today, the modern dilemma. Society absolutely had to create rules to prevent total chaos, but when those very rules are taken to absolute extremes without any empathy or education, they cause the silent, devastating suffering we just saw in Saad and She.
So the big takeaway for us today from this text is that we are trapped in a massive biological paradox. On one hand, human sexuality is the fundamental source of life. Without it, humanity ceases to exist. Poof, gone. But on the other hand, without strict boundaries around it, human society destroys itself through chaos. So our ultimate challenge as a society is finding that incredibly delicate, difficult balance between total destructive chaos and soul-crushing extreme repression.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you pondering a really challenging question, directly inspired by the heartbreaking accounts in our source text. How do we honor the biological realities of being human while still preserving the fabric of a civilized society? Basically, how do we maintain the boundaries we need for order without turning our youth into breathing corpses? It's a heavy question for sure, but it's one that demands empathy, real education, and a willingness to finally break the taboo. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I hope this provided a clearer, structured understanding of a deeply complex human issue.